Today's guest is Jan Baan. Welcome, Jan. And we're going to talk about the future of ERP and artificial intelligence. How is that evolving in this space?
Wayne, excellent for inviting me. It's my honor and my pleasure.
Yeah, no worries.
What is now the core element of ERP? We built in Baan quite a unique element. We call it customer order decouple point. That means we could handle engineer to order, make to stock, all in one element therein. Now, what we can do in the future, we can make a dynamic order decouple point and see all the traffic, what's going on. What Eli Goldratt mentioned in the goal, the theory of constraints. Now, ERP should help us to offer us the constraints to deliver it.
Yes.
But keep it simple. Do nothing more and take only the vanilla. Do never best of breed. Do best of breed. Do never monolithic.
Yes.
Ariba have nothing to do with the ERP stuff. You have only one invoice. The only integration is they give you one invoice. Now, by Google the same. They call it fusion. I call it confusion. If you look to Google, the only integration is they send you one invoice, and all those M&A elements are decoupled. Now that means take not only ERP, take a best of breed. Maybe you take PLM from your CAD/CAM supplier. They are better. They are better than ERP in the PLM part.
Yep.
Now maybe the financials and HR you take Workday or you take Locals. For CRM maybe you take PeopleSoft.
Yeah.
Or Salesforce you take Salesforce. Now and those maybe elements can be easier synchronized in an API. And now we have the REST API, and it's a revolution. It's free for the internet, where we have all those case elements already are productized. Now, and the REST API is propelling these microservices. And there we built what we call the containerization, the Dockerization. We make very small Lego pieces, all synchronized, 100 times more simpler, and they can always simply be configured and united.
And you made a good point there, or an interesting point in the sense of how you set up your data lake, or your ability to be able to interrogate the data at a different level, sort of thing. I've worked with organisations where they've been on the wrong track in the sense that they'd go to a vendor and the vendor would set them up with, say, a database, and then they'll talk to someone else and they say, well, we'll give you maybe an AWS instance and we'll put a firewall between those, and we'll then maybe give you an Azure instance and we'll put a firewall between that, protect your data. And then they lose that ability to be able to interrogate that data or actually use that data to actually make, that reckoning that you're talking about.
Yeah, and the problem started right in the beginning. We destroyed from the beginning because we built everything in one database with tens of thousands of database tables. Now, it could be 100 times simpler. And I built already a technology in Baan's time where we were thinking, can we not have it in 5 or 6 entities? Maybe you take your mass production scheduling data, you take your logistic data, your purchase data, your financials, and unite them together. But then BPM came, and therefore we stopped it. But you should bring the data back to the more centric points. That means the smaller the ERP system is and the less database tables, the easier you have it on the end.
That's right.
It's now in SAP. It's so tremendous, a lot of overlap with all this stuff, and redundancy. It's terrible. No one knows how to manage it.
And that's what they're finding. And I think I talked to you today about. I sent a message through today about SAP S4 journeys that I've been involved in. And the big problem that you find is they talk about in operating system reporting and be able to interrogate. And the difficulty with that is that what it's doing is actually not. It's slowing down the operating system. So it doesn't allow that operating system to actually operate properly, because all of a sudden when you're trying to query or look at or have this information collated together, you stall the system, and that's a real issue.
And another one is cybersecurity. Now, what we did for years already, you take the core data simple out of the ERP. And take care that if instead of 20,000 users, do it with maybe 1,000 users or 1,500. Bring it down, because the core functionality is only 10% of the people of the organization are dealing with the beginning, the give birth data there. Everything is jumping in with the reporting, etc. If you decouple that, that means first you take only the core elements from the different systems, you unite them together in what we call the big data element. And with Google, immediately everything we build it on cybersecurity, totally. It is so deep. Google has so much technology therein, what we built, and we built an accelerator that everything is in a bubble, secured. And then the microservices adopting all those elements. Now, what is at the core? You go then what we call no longer in Baan's time. I moved from an on-prem to a PaaS, platform as a service, and I did everything myself. I destroyed again, and now we go to infrastructure as a service. You can have Amazon, Microsoft, Azure, but for me it's Google the best, but anywhere. And there in infrastructure as a service, the core is your dev, sec, ops, your dev, security. Those elements are totally productized and they are managing everything. Now, what we then do, we say, how can you follow everything? We call it evergreen, ever young. In manufacturing, the only element in manufacturing is the core element is you have a bill of material. And in the bill of material, you can see you predicted maintenance, everything. I built the same. I built an SBOM, a software bill of material. That means in this bill of material, around everything, all the relations are known by me now. I know what components are you using, who is using it. Now, that brings a totally new input for AI. And then immediately you see you have the latest technology. You can refresh it every time. You have a new version. We know what it's doing. Now, those elements are productized. And what we see in the traditional ERP stuff is like handicrafts working real complicated. Now, bring the foundation a little back, control it, that you have the data in one entity from the logic. The less is better. That means how less you have in one version. Do not use warehouse management if you cannot have it outside. Don't use your financials over there. It can be decoupled. Now, okay, you can have it, but it's even better to decouple it because then the data lake is doing less work.
If you take and that then helps AI start to work. So you've actually got a structure.
Exactly.
You've actually defined your structure, so the AI actually has a model it can actually start to build and look at and actually leverage. Whereas what we see often is that we give AI such a massive task, so much data, so much information, it can't work.
That's the problem. It cannot scale. Now, what you see, if you take only the core silos, and if you have 20 silos in one, it's 100 times more complicated. That means, and it's much easier. The financial integration can be the last minute on your mobile. It has not to be done in the beginning. That means crucial element, two elements. Is decoupling point is a crucial part to simplify it. And the second part is late binding. Now, late binding means if you manufacture an airplane, it's not a very advanced project because a big monster is coming in and 9 months later is flying out. If you develop a car, every 20 seconds by Tesla, a car is dropped out. Now, and 1 hour before the car is finished, you can make a choice for what engine should be going. Now, that makes it 100 times more simple. Yeah, and software should be the same. We call it late binding. On the latest moment, you should connect it together. If I do the financial integration 1 second for the transaction, it's 100 times simpler than if we do it from the beginning.
Yes.
And for AI, it's so much more advanced and those have nothing to do with each other. That means if you look, the logistic part is already, transportation is already different. Then we can see retail, if another element. But even in manufacturing, let me give you a good example. In Vallejo, but I mentioned already 110,000 employees. They are like Bosch, one of the top tier ones, automotive. They came to the conclusion we do 2 billion in R&D, and we have to manage extremely complex projects for the OEM manufacturing cars like BMW, etc. Why should we do it? If we do it in ERP, then we kill ERP. And they came to the conclusion project control is more Kanban oriented. And that's different than if you go to mass production scheduling. Why should you not decouple in ERP a project solution different than a generic solution? That is this custom or the decouple point. Now, what we did, we rebuilt Then for 20,000 users, where I did this project control, we rebuilt it totally in microservices, because that is so much easier for microservices than the master practice scheduling part, the MRP part. Now, therefore, if you dismantle ERP, you can say project control can out. Procure to pay, order to cash, all those elements can be done in microservices.
Yep.
And then you still stay vanilla by the generic part, because that is the complicated part.
Yes.
In the beginning there. No, let us say, change nothing, but we do it the same like 30 years ago. It's nothing changed there. There's nothing new.
Yeah, I go back to the thing of, you talk about best of breed, and it's interesting because in Australia, best of breed is it's in some areas, but it's not widespread as such.
No,
And the challenge of that is the providers that come in want to actually be more than they actually are when it comes to coverage of the ERP as such, and so they don't have that logic where it's like, we are a part of a unit or a group of actual services or capabilities. We actually want to be it all, and the others are our slaves. And that you can. It's not the right way to architect best of breed, in my view.
Yeah, but you are misleaded. Some people say, "Oh, we take best of breed, and we have one version of the truth." It's nonsense. You have, first of all, you have already sometimes 20 instances.
Yep.
That means it's better to have it not, because it's not one version of the truth, because all those ERP elements are even not united together.
Yep.
We were in Boeing amazed. We could win Boeing in 94, 95, and we had 40,000 users on one instance, very disciplined. But Boeing was an extremely disciplined company to do this stuff. But in Philips or so, they have maybe 60 instances, and all different versions. And now, that means one version of the truth is nonsense.
Yeah.
Second, it is dead like it can be dead when the process will be broken very soon already. Then it is already dead.
Yeah.
Now, and what we now do is say, take it and take this process, integrate it with an enterprise service bus. But now we can do it already with APIs. And if you simplify the ERP part, like the core part, like what it is, respect that. Take only vanilla, then you can take immediately a new version. Never, and even for those who have already these bespoken parts, go to a new vanilla version and bring the bespoke in microservices.
Yeah. Now that makes real sense. I suppose the one thing that I see in microservices is you really probably need to know a bit more about how the business works to build the right microservice as such, or the right capability within that. And so how does that normally happen, or how do you see that happening?
That's simple. In ERP, we don't know how the business is working because we're adapting best practice from SAP. But in microservice, we know everything because it's downstream and you don't need IT. We do a lot in microservice with no code. And it means the business, and what is there? The business is simple business. It's the job to be done. The business is no longer processes. The business is workflow, and the workflow is known by the business. And now IT is over. IT, the CIO will report in the office of the COO, and it's no longer centralized IT. IT should be part of the execution of the business, and microservices are business oriented. Simple, because we know, and they are unique because they are company specific. The vendors does not know those.
No, that's right, and that has been one of my things I've seen over time, is the fact that the vendor comes in and says, we're going to apply world's best practice. So all of a sudden, I've dumbed down the business to be this version of what they believe business should be, which is what everyone else is. So you lose that competitive advantage. And the other thing is that they then don't understand. They go to a level that they don't actually understand those lower level processes, which is your workflow. It's those sorts of things.
And what we here do, the vendor knows, even the consultant, the Capgemini, etc., have even no clue what it means. You need an inside person and the Accentures. And even in this workflow, what we do always, it is built by the people themselves. We guide them a little, we help them a little, but you're not going to a system integrator to build it. Now, what we see a little is the citizen work can be done themselves, and many microservices can be replacing a little complicated stuff, and then you do it a little together. But then you need what we call a software factory.
Yeah.
What we did in this software factory, I can do it 10 times faster. What we do with Rapid, we are immediately from the business generating plain Java code. That means I did it in Baan. I generated already something more C++ for the stuff that was unreadable, but plain Java means everyone can read it. I can make a Java programmer 4 times more productive. And I do it immediately, not after 9 months, immediately with the business owner. In an afternoon, an architect is sitting with the business owner together and show immediately the UIs. And then we have already then 80% of the source code already there. And then the programmer can do the finishing touch in these elements, but the business is driving it. And the business now for the first time is aligning business and IT. The business understand what it's doing. Now,
What about if the business, and I'm only just, this is an example because it's fresh in my mind from a client I worked with where, they were very much in the Excel world and everything off system. They had Access databases, they had Outlook as being their way of communicating and all of that sort of thing. So when we asked them about processes, for them they were actually lost because they only knew their bit. I make a call, I do this, I do that.
but that was in the BPM world more. Normally, in microservices, if you understand spreadsheet, the XML is good enough. You do the same. And we have these no coding elements more where you see these and they see the task in the workflow. And those tasks run maybe for 2 days, 3 days. The processes, you decouple little the processes from the workflow. And the workflow, and we say 50% of all the employees are workflow driven. Say 10% is ERP driven, maybe 40% more or less is end-to-end processes, even less. That means what we do, if you decouple it, and then in the process world, take care that you have good data architects. You need these architects who understand it. They make it, and they should understand the AI part from a data standpoint. They are data specific guys therein. And then, now what is then the change? If you have a smaller company, $100 million revenue, maybe $10 million EBITDA, they have $90 million operating costs. Now, and even Peter Drucker explained already, prophetized already last century, that on the end, the job to be done by the employee can be twice more effective. Now, if that is true, this $90 million cost, maybe 60 million is human related, maybe 50 million is human related. If it is true, it can be twice more. 25 million can go to the EBITDA.
Yeah,
now,
that's right.
Today, ERP has no contribution to the EBITDA. It's eating the EBITDA and not providing the EBITDA. Now, in tomorrow's world, these workflows are catalyzations for the workflow. The EBITDA should be doubling from the company in what we're doing. Now, but the people are even only talking over costs, but not how the EBITDA is doing.
And it's interesting because if we look at the discussion that takes place at the moment, where we've got vendors saying, and so a really big a vendor actually saying, we're going to end support, so you need to go to a new technology. There's nothing in that discussion where it talks about this. If you implement this properly, it will start paying for itself, and essentially that's driving it down to the EBITDA results that you're actually getting. All they're looking at is that it's technology driven, it's process heavy, and it's lacking that real thing of why would I spend all this money for a major implementation when
you need we call it now, everything is there. We call it ever young or ever green. Why should you not have all these microservices can be every month totally new? Permanently. Now, and that simplifies the simplification of all this deployment cost. And what you see it a little, again, in a car, you have 3 technology waves. You have mechanics, old-fashioned, electronics, and software. Now, the same we have here, you have the silos. If you decouple them, this old stuff, let it stay for a while, because don't replace it immediately, then you kill yourself. Don't go too early to a new implementation. Let it stay. The good stuff is maybe you have perpetual. Why should you give it up? You have not to pay the maintenance. Own it. No,
Yes, it's actually interesting because we've been talking to a client, they're a vendor of a different sort, in the sense that what they say is exactly what you've talked about. You know, the pressure is that we move off perpetual license, we move off premise, we move those sort of things, and they say, well, don't do that. Why don't we support you? And
yeah,
then you take the time to actually use that ERP that probably works for you
yeah,
and enhance it and build those things like you talk about the microservices bit
yeah.
where you can actually modernize it in some ways, or you can add AI over the top.
They have two elements. You extremely reduce the cost of your legacy, but
Yep.
that's a simple amount because you double your EBITDA. That
Yep.
means because if you win more downstream than to replace the upstream,
That's
and
right.
if you and then therefore simplify the upstream, it's nothing. There's nothing changing. Even
Mm.
you can have your own hardware will work. You have not even to be on the cloud.
Mm.
It's good enough. But okay, if you like to go to the cloud, fine, and you like to have maybe a data warehouse and all the stuff, it's fine. But
Yep.
do it always with less users.
Yep.
Take care that you have less, reduce your vendor lock-in. And in the downstream, by us in the downstream, there's no vendor lock-in.
Yep.
Everything is in plain Java.
Mm.
Now, and
And that's a real difference, because the thing is that, many times the money's been in selling the licenses, and in subscription model it's selling as many accesses as you can to whatever you need,
yeah,
and even things you don't need.
yeah,
That view that you've got there is actually only take the people into your ERP that you actually need, and then have the other people doing or capturing information or using the microservices, which is a whole different cost model.
no, yeah, but now the problem is you have all the people in ERP, the truck drivers in ERP, and it takes 2 days before they can learn it. If
Yes.
you if you take only 1,000 people in ERP instead of 10,000 people, they know it. They did it already for 20 years, and those guys know all the stuff, the function keys and everything. They do it. Never do reporting there. Ever, never do bespoke.
Yep.
The less that means the less users, the more beneficial you bring it.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. And it's one of those things that, I think people are caught in the middle. They believe that's where they want to be. They're
Yeah,
told by the vendors, and if we talk, some of the bigger vendors, they just want to sell a bigger
yeah.
solution than what it is, take over everything.
There is no customer intimacy. There
Yep.
is only an element is there for selling to bring more,
Yep.
and the whole and the value proposition is that even what SAP is now doing, they force people. They make a tremendous job of revenue. They've not even to implement it because they force you. If you're not doing, if you're not make a contract, then you're out. Now,
Yeah.
suppose
Yeah.
you have a nice car, you bought it last year, a good Mercedes, and the people saying, no, I have this Porsche car. If you're not buying this Porsche in next year, then I give you no services.
Mm,
No,
that's, but it's interesting. Even in some instances, we've seen where these large implementations they get underway, they stall, and what you find is they're using a legacy ERP, and they are building a new ERP, which is a monolith, and it's just too big.
yeah,
And then you find that they get caught in this middle where I can't go off my legacy because the new one actually doesn't work for me. The processes, the
yeah,
systems,
yeah,
the amount
yeah,
of people I want in it can't keep up with what I'm looking for. And so you're finding organizations where they're stuck in the world of both softwares,
yeah.
paying for both, and only getting probably half the value of any.
And realize if you do this one, they can build it, but they build it in tools from last century. All these BAPIs, if you look, the BAPIs they were invented for mainframes.
Mm,
And it is the whole BAPI structure is so complex. I've been there with my 4GL, but it was even on micro, it was already on Unix. But it's
mm,
so complicated to do all this workflow type of stuff. And then you're forced in, you have here technology from last month
mm.
and do this stuff. And there you have these microservices. They are so easy to use, so simple. And here we do it with complicated stuff where we need specialist guys like in COBOL the old days or so.
And you're right, because eventually if people don't get it, don't understand it, they don't use it, because if you've ever used SAP ECC6, and I trained it, so I understand how complicated it is, and people would glaze over when they'd see the screens for the first time. And so the big challenge that you're trying to overcome now is, how can someone pick it up and use it as quickly as what they can use their iPhone?
Yeah, yeah,
A young child at age of 5 can actually probably use an iPhone, and that's what we need to drive into
yeah.
users.
how could we do so simple with all those socializing elements? Now, if we have all this complex stuff, we can do it extremely simple. Now, what we built, we have a kind of a WhatsApp included, all in this workflow, all those the data driven, the collaboration stuff is totally included.
Yep.
And on this moment, now we can meet each other, but on the same moment, we could use together work on one screen, and we have Google Meet, and immediately can say, sit in my office, and we deal with the same screen together.
Yep.
And with the same view, all this collaborating stuff can change totally the mobile and the world of collaborating.
Yeah, it does, and I think that's the one thing that many of these others, they talk about Copilot and they talk about all of those sort of other things, but they don't actually leverage the value of, like you say, that collaborating, that ability to be able to have people see what you see, work
Yep.
out a problem, and solve those issues as
Yep.
you go, using in as it happens sort of thing. Is it not just send an email and say you've got an issue here? It's I've spoken, like I say, to Dan, and he talked a lot about you and Judith, and it's been
And
really
then
one of those things. I really wanted to be able to talk to you and share that understanding, or learn a bit more about your vision, and I really like that entrepreneurial vision that you actually have, because that's where growth will happen for organizations, for small business, for businesses that are taking that leap, taking that next opportunity that other organizations are squandering, larger organizations are squandering. So it's been great to talk to you. You've actually restored my faith in the fact of software people, because what you do is you actually talk about the business and the value the business can derive. How much can my software cost you every year so that I make money, sort of thing, as a software vendor. And that's what I see in the software world today, is that there's a lot more slanted towards that than this thing of how can I make your business enabled by software far more effective, far more operationally efficient.